Hey, Love Your Life fam. It's Crystal and Andre Holland.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, looking forward to hearing from you. So to find us, you can check us out on
Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We look forward to hearing from you all.
Yeah, we came a long way, and that's what the song say. And I can do all things. I can do all things. Yeah, I can do all things. Yeah,
hey, Love Your Life family. Welcome back to another Loving Your Life podcast. It's your sis, Crystal.
What's going on, fam? It's your boy, Andre. What it do, what it do, what it do.
And we are back at you with another discussion about loving your life. How you doing this morning, baby?
I'm doing well. Hey, listen, it's a beautiful morning. Obviously, there's a lot going on in America, a lot going on in the world. But today, just like any other day, is a day that we can be a part of the solution, a part of the problem. So for sure, I am focused on just continuing to do my part. And, while I listen, watch, read, learn, and then, as always, look for opportunities to do my part. I truly believe it starts off with important dialogue and discussions that need to be had. I think that's imperative in any type of relationship, anything that's going on, whether you're working on a business plan, working on improving your family. So, how I'm doing today, babe, I'm doing great. I'm really looking for ways that I can continue to be meaningful and intentional and being a part of the solutions. What about you, babe? What's going on with you?
Doing all right. Doing good. At the same time, heavy a little bit this morning. Just continuing to process everything because there's just so many layers to all that we're seeing. And so again, looking at what is our part? What is my part? What does it look like? And being like you said, solution oriented. And so, with that said, today's a little heavy.
So a little heavy. Well, listen here, girl. I'm gonna lighten you up. No, but on a serious note, for sure, there's a lot going on. One of the things, babe, I really would like to talk about is just the power of communication today. I think this is so imperative. And listen, for all of us, regardless of where you're from, the power of communication is very key because it bleeds over into so many aspects of our life. From our personal life to our professional life to our social life. The power of communication is imperative, and I do think, and I know we need to be more conscious of how we communicate.
Right.
So the power of communication, we're going to talk about, obviously, when you look up just even communication, one of the things you'll find out, 4 types of communication: verbal, nonverbal, written, and visual. All of these are important. All of these share an important piece that needs to be addressed or needs to be reflected upon or used depending on the setting. But the issue goes back down to communication. And so however we communicate, I think we need to keep in mind the importance of it. Therefore, we can be intentional and not drop the ball in having discussions that need to be had.
I concur with you. I think that there's so many struggles with communications for many, many reasons. But one of the main things that I think really interfere with effective communication is unmanaged emotions that tend to just really overshadow what you're trying to convey or your ability to hear. When somebody's trying to convey out of their experience or, how you can support them or how you need to be supported, I think that this is a huge reason and why people run from it or, again, avoidance or just feel like they're in a whirlwind when it comes to bringing up stuff. We look at the world right now, stuff that is nothing new. It's just it has not been effectively communicated at a larger scale. And so right now we know that there's just a big uproar and I think the center of it is just poor communication.
Well, I think what's 2 things. I do want to disagree with you unless I'm hearing something that I realize that I'm hearing something different than what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I think a lot has been communicated in regards, especially if we're specifically talking about, the race issue in America. And yes, I love America. I'm glad to be an African American. I don't want to go to another country. I thank God for this country, but that doesn't mean that there are things that needs to be improved. Okay, so before someone say, well, if you don't like it, go back to Africa. Well, for number one, I've never lived in Africa. I was born in America, South Carolina to be exact. So, but with that said, there are things that needs to be improved. But you mentioned there have been a lot of communication and a lot of communication surrounding race relations in America. I think a big part of it is, I don't think, specifically about this particular incident in regards to race, I don't think it's not a lack of communicating about it. I think it's just been a lack of corresponding action.
And that's where I'm going. Where when you're talking to somebody that you're so blinded by the emotion that you're not truly listening. Just you and I have talked about this before, where you point out the riots versus the cry. You know what I mean?
Okay, right. So like the root causes that are contributing factors,
right,
to the parts of the protest. I want to be sure, parts of the protest where it's riots and so forth. Okay.
Right. And so within marriage, it can be, and this is just one scenario. If the husband always sees the wife as nagging, or she's always crying about something, and that's what he got out of what she said. He was blinded by the emotion and failed to hear her. And vice versa with kids, when they're acting up and you're like, I'm tired of talking about this, and your solution is spank them, throw them in a room, put them in a timeout, versus truly, okay, what is at the root of what is causing this cry?
Well, and I think that is why the power of communication is so important. Like I said, it affects us in all aspects of life. So because you mentioned relationships, I mean, this is not just about the protests that are going on here in America. Now, it's in general, the power of communication has got to be placed on a premium. And this is why I say this. We're married, husband and wife. I mean, not a day that doesn't go by that we have to engage in meaningful dialogue. Number one, to make sure we can just hear one another's heart.
Right.
Not trying to fix anything, because there are oftentimes we have conversations just to share how we're feeling, how we're doing, not with the intention of, let me hear what you have to say so I can go do something about it. No, just so we can hear. So that's important, just being a place to talk, how you're feeling, what's going on with you. But then I think the other aspect is, in order for us to walk together as husband and wife and walking the same direction, we have to communicate so that we both know which direction we're going to be headed.
Right.
When we need to make a left, when we need to pivot, make a right, when we need to turn around. And so I do believe that there are a lot of, not just in regards to one aspect, but if we really reflect on every aspect of our life, I do believe and been a witness that a lot of people are not successful in different aspects of their life because of a lack of communication.
Right.
I mean, you think about it. So I just shared an example of husband and wife, but even, for business owners, you started your own company, your business, or you work for someone, or whatever the case is, you have got to effectively communicate the vision of the company, the purpose, or even the instructions of how to the people that you're working with, the people that you're working for, your vendors, et cetera, et cetera. There has to be communication, clear communication, so that everyone that's playing a role in your business, your job, whatever it is, they all understand where we're headed, and they understand the importance of what they need to do. They have a clear understanding of what they need to do, and you hold them to that. So I'm going to stress communication is key. And I do believe that it's oftentimes minimized because we've been running and going and this and that, or we get to a place where at times, someone may feel like I shouldn't have to keep having these conversations over and over. And I've been guilty of that. I caught myself, baby, it's funny, even as I'm saying this, I remember I caught myself some years ago. And I was talking to one of our sons, and he did something that was wrong or wasn't, as we discussed or as I showed him or whatever. And I said, I'm not going to keep having these conversations with you.
Right.
And I said, we've already talked about this. But then I remember years ago when I said this to him, I thought, well, yes, I am going to keep having these conversations. That's part of me being a father and raising you up. You're going to make mistakes. You may forget, but that's a part of being a father. Continue the discussions and the conversations until they can consistently take on the task, with or without you being there.
Right.
And so, again, I think sometimes people get to a place where they feel like communication is no longer needed, and it'll just be business as usual. But we always have to keep circling back around and making sure we're addressing things and having discussions that need to be had.
Right. And you really gave a great example to really what I was trying to convey at first, just the frustration of having to return to a topic. But the frustration is like overshadowing the fact that, oh, well, snap, I do need to do this. And it goes back to listening. Mm-hmm. And I love the definition because it says to take notice of and act on what someone says, respond to advance or a request. And so when something is not acted upon, you are conveying to that person you're not listening. And so it circles back around. And that's why we see in life just stuff. It's like, we've already addressed this. Oh, the protesting again, whatever the case may be in your marriage. Here we go again about this or that. And it goes back to, are you listening? Which is part of communication. Or do you find yourself every day or 5 days out of the week yelling the same old mess out of your mouth? I'm tired of talking about this. Here you go, bringing this up again. And if that's you, you have to ask yourself the why. Why do you keep saying it? Which is going to bottom line get to, man, I'm not listening. I'm not acting upon. And that doesn't mean that you're bending or giving somebody exactly what they want, but that you begin to have effective communication that is solution oriented.
Right, which I often say corresponding action.
Right.
Part of discussion is you talk about it, and then you have takeaways with corresponding action, so that you all know what each individual or group has to do in order to move the needle forward. So I think that's big, man. I'm glad you brought that up. The importance of the acting on what's been discussed.
Right.
And you know what? And there has been a lot of conversations or things that have been discussed that's fallen on deaf ears, or it's been stated, but no action.
Right.
Hence increases the frustration. And so even specifically, I know we're kind of jumping back and forth, but even specifically in regards to, the protests and so forth, a lot of the passion behind it and the frustration and the high volume and the things that are going on now is a result of feeling just that, saying the same thing over and over again, and no one is acting upon it. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say no one, but there's a lot of things that have not been acted upon it, or, and it gets frustrating. And so, again, some of these things that are happening, and I'm not condoning it. Anytime people get hurt or property and so forth is destroyed or destruction, but I understand it. It's coming from a place of frustration.
Right.
And it's coming from a place of anger. Mm-hmm. It's coming from a place of being fed up. And then I've read comments, and even people I've talked to, I just don't understand it, why they're, destroying their own neighborhoods. I want to say this. First of all, that again ties into the very narrative.
Come on now.
Because they don't own these things that they're destroying.
Right. So
that's a whole nother level that deals with some of the systematic oppression. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm never going to give anyone a pass. We don't teach our children. I said, regardless, in spite of what is going on, how difficult it is, still I rise.
Right.
Okay. So don't, come in with this foolishness. I'm never going to give anyone a pass and say why they can't be successful. But I do want to share that the argument of you're destroying your own stuff, your own neighborhood. No, these are things in their neighborhood, but they don't own them.
Right.
And oftentimes money is spent in different places, and they're, other than what they buy, money is not being poured back into the things of interest or their needs. So again, I'm not trying to speak for all black people, but I do want to stress that very statement, they're destroying their own neighborhood, really speaks to the lack of understanding of what the reality of it is. Just because a store is in someone's neighborhood doesn't mean that the neighborhood is receiving the benefits of that store, meaning that store's profits doesn't mean that it's pouring back into community investment, things that they need.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge piece.
I think that's a huge piece. And I was conversing with my sis, and she was like, you know, we look at the stimulus check and then we look at the people that are directly affected they got this $1,200 check and their rent may be $1,000, right? And if you're laid off, and we don't co-sign violence, bottom line, or, stealing. We're not co-signing that. But what mother or father do you know is going to sit back and watch their family starve? And they're waiting on unemployment check. They've done what they can with what the government was able to assist with. And again, I'm not condoning you walking up in a store and stealing and stuff. But there's a lot of people that are not going to sit around and look at their children hungry, and they're still waiting on funding from the government.
But I want to stress, though, I don't think that the violence is a result of, I think the issue is more about centered around the frustration of race.
Well, absolutely.
And race relations, not having. Well, that's a part of it, but I don't think right now the big protest and so forth is directly related to race relations.
It is, but I'm just saying that all of the underlying issues that have been bubbling.
Right. So you're saying like play a part in the frustration.
Right.
Gotcha.
And so that's what I'm saying. And so, and it goes back to we have not been heard.
And then one of the things too, the power of communication, why it's so key, because it's kind of like, we mentioned one of the means of communication is nonverbal. And even visual. It has to do with body language. Because oftentimes communication is not just what you say, but you speak with your body language. So like if someone is trying to share some information with me and my body language shows, be quiet, I'm acting like I'm not interested, I don't want to hear it, that's going to rise up some emotions in the person that's trying to communicate with me. Basically, what they're saying is not important.
Right.
And so I do think that body language, what has not been said, and even the body language of some of the listeners has, again, played also a role in where we are. If someone feels, if a lot of people, if people in general, if they feel like they're not heard, it does increase anxiety, increase frustration, and it can get to a point of hopelessness. And it's like, you know what? I'm tired of beating a dead horse. Nothing's going to change, so I'm gonna address this in another manner. Mm-hmm. But even if from one of the things too, because I said the power of communication, it is so big because I want you to, any relationship, I sit and think about, us as parents. So we talked about husband and wife and the importance of communication, but just think about how much on a daily basis we communicate with our children. Right. First thing in the morning, summertime, they have some things they need to do. They're, a devotional time to just kind of think about their day. They have their chores to complete. Mm-hmm. We communicate with them about how they're feeling, things that are going on. I mean, it's so much on a daily basis.
Right.
That daily check-in is so imperative. And at the end of the day, without communicating with our children, I mean, that directly correlates to, them not having a healthy outlet, maybe, being not as productive as they can be versus if they had some nurturing family members or loved ones to converse with. I mean, we all need that. And so this thing is so deep. Communication, man, is so deep, and it spills over again into so many different, avenues of life.
Well, and we live in a world that's promoting and constantly flooding us with, if you're not doing this and you're not gonna be that. And if you're inundated with, you better get on your grind, you better do this, better do that, or you're not gonna have this, and you spend so much time trying to build your future and you're not building your tribe. You're not building the minds of the very seed that came from you. And then you look at all that you've accomplished, but your family is falling apart now. Right. And so really you have to bridge that gap and have balance. And I'm not saying that that's easy, especially depending on what your business is and you're in the building process. But really disciplining yourself to, I'm going to communicate and make time for the business on such and such days, and set a boundary that there are certain days and times it's you and your wife, it's you and your children, that you are intentionally putting just as much time into your family, your tribe, as you are into your future.
So let me ask you a question, babe. And again, let me put a little pen in here and say this before I ask the question. I want to stress, listen, for us, and even I would assume a lot of people, our parents, people brought us to the world, they did the best they could with what they had.
Right.
Okay. But so this is not to throw anyone on the bus, but I do want you to be just transparent. Mm-hmm. If you could say one thing in regards to communication about how your parents communicated with you, what advice, the Crystal of today, what advice or what would you tell your parents in regards to communication, whether it be how much you communicate, the lack thereof, or anything in between? What would you tell your parents now about communication? As it directly relates to how you were raised, what you were going through, your upbringing. Talk about that a little bit.
Growing up, having parents that came out of segregated schools, and dealing with levels of oppression beyond what we can even imagine. Father working and picking cotton, just it sounds weird even saying that. And so there was a determination to get out of that environment. So they, put themselves through school, became amazing people. And my parents worked hard. My dad traveled a lot with his job. My mom worked 2 jobs. She walked to work. She sacrificed for us. But one of the things I honor and appreciate them for is how hard they work for my brother and I. What I missed is more time to truly talk to them and to really hear, what it is, what it was like. And I know as a parent, there's only so much sometimes parents feel like they can discuss with their kids. But that's something that I missed. And I wish I would have been able to truly hear their hearts about how they were feeling, because I think that it would have taught me how to talk about how I'm feeling at an early age.
No, that's good. So do you think they were, because you mentioned like how hard they worked, and I've had conversations with your father about, growing up in a segregated South, really his childhood and Jim Crow era and just a lot of things. But he, so I definitely, I've heard the stories of just the labor and the hard work and how he just left and walked and went to college, paid his way through college.
Hitchhiked, man. It's like,
got a, degree in soil science and continued his education and really worked hard for his family. So would you say that just the intense labor and the stress and everything associated with it, communication or communicating with you all was just something that was intentionally not engaged in on a day-to-day basis?
I don't know if
or do you think it was he didn't necessarily know how, or they didn't know how?
I think some of it may have not knowing how, and I think some of it could be just the process for them to get to where they were. I think that there are portions of it that were traumatic and just didn't want to.
Oh, that's good.
Talk about it.
So traumatic that even reliving it to talk to you about it could have been doing them harm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that there were pieces like my dad would make comments here and there to avoid this or to avoid that, but didn't really unpack it. And so there were certain comments that shaped us, and some of the stuff that he was saying did happen and it was true. But I had to learn to not apply that to every person that didn't look like me, and so that was probably the hard part. But, I just got bits and pieces of it, and I wish he would have unpacked it or my mom would have unpacked it more.
Yeah. I think for me, even as I think about communication and what is one thing that I would say to my parents, obviously my father is no longer with us, went on to be with the Lord. My mom is still alive. For me, when I think about specifically what would I say to them in regards to how they communicated with me, I would say for sure, thank you. And the reason why I say that is because, I had my time with both my mom and dad, and we talked about everything under the sun. So with my dad, we both love fishing. I realize now that as a kid, I tagged along and followed him fishing because I wanted time with him. And now I love fishing. But I think as a kid, it was more so about being with my pops. But when we were fishing, you know, we'd be up there, you know, at the lake, sun up to sundown, and nothing was off limits. Girls, relationships, sex, school, work hard, sports, scholarships, what's your future. I mean, we talked about so much, and I really appreciate just the level of transparency. You know, oftentimes kids have an image that their dad and mom is perfect and like a superhero. Well, my parents were my superheroes and people I looked up to, but I was able to talk to them about their shortcomings, which was huge.
That is.
You know, being able to just hear, you know, your pops and say some of the things that he did that he wished he hadn't have done, and I'm not saying he told me everything.
Right.
I'm sure there was a lot of stuff he did say. However, when we were fishing on that water on the lake, you know, it was an open book. I mean, we discussed and talked about so much. And so for me, I would definitely say thank you. I appreciate that because I know, you know, with my sons and my daughter, our daughter, and our sons, I spent a lot of time just truly talking to them. And that's because of my upbringing, you know. So my dad and I, we had our time. Right. And then at the same time, you know, my mom and I, we had our time. Mm-hmm. And we talked about stuff that I think a lot of people would think no child should talk about. But again, with my mom, this is my story, you know, but with her, we talked about, you know, relationships, marriage, you know, just, you know, girls, sex. I mean, everything. She was telling me from a mother's perspective about, you know, life and about the importance of working hard and some of the things that they've gone through and experiences. So I can say, although there were other aspects just like any other family that, you know, we struggled in and so forth, but communication, when I look back at it, you know, I can't speak for my brothers. Definitely, you know, my sister or my brother Stephen, who's going on to be with the Lord, I can't speak. But for me, I can say that how I communicated with my mom and my dad, I would definitely say thank you. I appreciate it because, I mean, we had some throughout my life growing up to the time I left home from college. And then, you know, even after college, I just felt that we had invaluable times to communicate about everything under the sun. So for sure, I would say thank you, you know, huge. But even as we talk about communication, I think, and even for those who may be listening, it's important, whatever you did not have, we're talking about communication today. So if you are the one that you felt you had an excellent model of what communication looked like, and that was a part of your norm, being able to talk to your parents and your loved ones and those that were raising you, great, you hold on to that. But on the flip side, if that was an area of weakness that you grew up in, not being able to communicate, not really knowing how to express your emotions, again, no one gets a pass. When you become an adult, you put away childish things, so you need to be intentional.
That's good. To
work on improving your communication ability. Because your children and those people that you're raising and those people that you're working with, they're not just going to be able to get it because you grunt and frown and walk around like you upset and no one knows what the problem is.
Well, and another thing to add to that is being cautious of pride, where you don't know something, but you don't want nobody to know that you don't know it. Yeah. And so, you may just run off at the mouth or change the subject right away. And here's the thing, if that is like you're doing that with your children, man, you are teaching them how to not be vulnerable, how to not look within and be mindful like that. It's okay if you don't know. Yeah. And so it's actually liberating for me. I can't speak for everybody to be able to tell my child, I don't know. Why? Why is that liberating? Because I want them to understand you don't know everything. You're not going to know everything, and you need other people. And then it encourages you to keep educating yourself, keep learning. And I think that that's powerful. But if and if that's you struggle with not being able to have all the answers and know everything, being able to like, dang, I'm prideful, and look at what shaped that. And then if you want to change, be intentional of, humbling yourself and being okay with saying, I don't know, I don't have the answer.
Right. Well, and again, so that really deals with being mature enough to admit you have shortcomings, like we all do, to admit that you may not be strong in the area, but being bold enough to get help. And that's why I say no one gets a pass, because at the end of the day, our parents or whoever raised us, they can only give us the best that they can give us. At the end of the day, when you become a man, you put away childish things. Part of being a child is being prideful, not wanting to admit when you're wrong, trying to argue when you need to be quiet and listen. Part of being mature is spending money, your resources, in ways that's going to help you, okay? So again, be mature about it. If you're at a place where you realize it's a struggle, invest in your time and your money to get help. This communication piece is huge. We talked about it. Verbal communication, nonverbal, written, visual. But at the end of the day, when I wrapping us all up, thinking about family, husband and wife, mother, daughter, father, son, co-workers, business owners, vendors, buyers, sellers, all of that, the stock market, etc. All of that is truly tied around communication.
Yes, it is. It really is.
Communication. And so we have got to get this right. And even in regards to the protests that are going on in America as a result of these tragic deaths at the hand of the police officers and so forth. And again, I'm communicating this. I'm not saying the majority or all police officers are bad. So please, okay? But let's be real. Part of how we get from where we are now to a better place, as much as I'm angry, I'm mad, I get frustrated. At times I'm grieving. I feel like crying, okay? As much as all of that is going on, we have got to get back to the table, continue continue the discussion, engaging in dialogue with the goal of going and doing our work and acting upon what we've discussed. We cannot isolate ourselves with our individual races and our individual bunkers and be so full of hate that we don't realize that we're humans. We have more in common. We have got to get back to the table. And my prayer, my hope, and my mission is to not delete people on Facebook, but to engage in dialogue, to keep the lines of communication open. So this is huge, man. Communication is huge.
It definitely is. And then I always encourage people, what is your agenda? And then what is the agenda of the communication outlets that you're listening to? And being cognizant of that if you're turning on the news and you see so much negativity, understand that there's an agenda. If somebody's always feeding the negative part, because we have to acknowledge there are grassroots organizations that are on the ground. They are working, they are doing amazing things. And if you don't see that in your media outlets, there is a reason you don't see that, because sad to say, but we live in a culture that thrives off of fear and pushing fear and controlling people. And that is truth. That is fact. And being able to unplug from that toxic frequency and truly being able to identify organizations within your community that are doing a lot of amazing things, and being able to communicate that through your social media outlets. Because like I said, there's more love, there's more positive, there's more great things going on in the world than we see.
And, and one last thing before we go, I want to stress this. My hope and my prayer is what is being communicated more so than all the individual right and left wing and all these extremes. My hope is what that's being communicated is when you see people of all ethnic backgrounds, white, black, Native American, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, the list goes on and on, all backgrounds in the streets protesting for justice. My hope is that communicates that, listen, this is a human issue that we must tackle.
Right.
And that there's strength in numbers, unity. Let that be communicated. Where it's not just, black people protesting injustices. And it's not just here in America. So that should communicate to the world at large that this is an issue that we all need to play a part in, all come together to fix. So listen, it's been real, man. I enjoyed this time, man. Communication is key. Baby, tell them where they can check us out at.
You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Oh my gosh, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. So sorry.
All right, I've been communicating and my baby tripping. Now, hey, but listen, we love y'all. God bless y'all. Take care. Peace.
Shout to the city that raised me. Shout to the people that made me. I'm from the 80s. I don't think mumbling wavy. I grew up black on a Jay-Z. Maybe I'm crazy. I ain't been wondering lately. Feel like it's there for the taking. Feel like I'm good with the changes. Know who I am. And that's the most dangerous state.
Hey, Love Your Life fam. It's Crystal and Andre Holland.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, looking forward to hearing from you. So to find us, you can check us out on
Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We look forward to hearing from you all.